Well, thank you, Dave. Well, first of all, thank you so much for being a part of my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you live, that type of thing?
Sure. I live in Nottingham, England. I'm business development manager for NPay Precision Astro Engineering. Um, and yeah, I love astronomy and I love space. I watched the launch of the Mars probe the other day with great anticipation. And yeah, it's just a fun thing. I like it a lot.
That's pretty awesome. Awesome. Have you heard of an American company called Astrobotic?
Astrobotic? No, I haven't.
Oh, they're sending a probe to the
I feel like
moon.
I should have done now.
Oh, sorry. They're sending a probe to the moon as part of NASA's commercial lunar payload services program next year. So
Okay,
I
superb.
just thinking about that. What so business development? Oh, so you're looking for like satellite operators and small sat people to launch, or what?
NPay Precision Astro Engineering makes accessories for telescopes for the amateur market. So we don't do anything as sexy as putting things on rockets, sadly. I mean, would like to, of course, but
You know, I was thinking it'd be really neat to create a telescope that could slew very fast, and
yeah,
then maybe be able to track like fireballs of meteors that come in, and try to
yeah,
do some spectrography with
yeah,
the
that
light
would
that
be
you.
awesome.
And I was wondering if you had a clue on some first steps I could go about doing that with your
Well,
background.
well, I guess if you wanted to do something like a fireball or meteor streaking through the sky, um, I guess aperture is going to be pretty much everything for that. So the bigger you can get. Now, of course, with aperture comes weight, which comes difficulty to drive. You know, like the physics start taking over. Um, so in terms of driving it, I suppose, and tracking it, I guess it would be as large as you could afford for whatever you wanted to throw at it. And in terms of that, there's probably not going to be much of an upper limit, unfortunately. I always tend to say to people that astronomy is a bit like, you know, diamonds in real estate. There's no upper limit to what you can spend. Um, and depending on the application, of course, spending lots of money doesn't necessarily give you genuine benefits. So don't fall into the trap of, you know, spending tens of thousands when only thousands will be required. In terms of tracking an object rapidly moving through the sky, you're going to need some fairly hefty software and analytics to track the object. For, I would say, and I'm thinking this literally off the top of my head, if you asked me the question, because no one's asked me this before. But I mean, firstly, you're going to have to identify where it is in the sky. So you'll need like a 360-degree view camera, and thankfully they're cheap. So you'd have to have one of those. You'd have to detect the initial flash. You would then have to move your telescope rapidly to where the initial flash was. You're also going to need directional information. And this is where it gets complicated. And I know this because a friend of mine used to design anti-aircraft missile sites for tracking aircraft across the sky. And then it would like track it, lock it on, and then launch the missile. And it's that tracking across the sky and the position where it's at and where it's going to, which is the really difficult thing to do. And he told me that was second differential mathematics, which is over the top of my head. So yes, that would be, you would have a substantial challenge to do that in the time frame that you've got. I mean, you're basically, imagine tracking an incoming missile, getting its coordinates, tracking it across the sky, and then blasting it with a laser beam. You're in that level of complication to track a fireball and gather spectroscopic data. But wow, yeah, exciting project. Count us in if you want some help with it.
It's more of a dream right now than a project, but yeah, maybe tracking satellites would be a good first step. You know, at least they have once you observe the first little bit, you kind of know the orbit, so you don't have to deal with the fact they're
Yeah,
slowing down and they're coming closer to you, and
yeah,
then maybe kind of build up to it like that.
yeah,
Then you get something for like a tennis match, just tracking the ball
yeah,
going back and forth,
yeah.
a knower. Uh, but what kind of accessories y'all make?
So we produce the world's only high-end astrometric turret. So it's a 6-position eyepiece turret, and you load it up with your accessories or a camera if you want them. It's got a very high quality 1/10 wave mirror in it, and so it can be used for astro photography. And yeah, off you go. So sort of like its key applications are people with sort of the longer refractors. It's quite heavy when you've got it at the end of your scope, so it's a good counterbalance to a long refractor. And people with refractors who like looking at the moon, because you'd have your different magnifications for zooming in. So you'd sort of like start with your whole moon, and then you'd go to like the terminator line, and then craters on the terminator line, and then details on the craters on the terminator line, or with just a flick of the turret. And you don't have, I guess it's parfocal, you don't have to change focus. So it's a very handy gadget, if I do say so myself.
Do y'all sell it in the U.S.?
Say again.
Do y'all sell it in the United States?
Oh yes, we sell it all over the world.
I'm
Not
afraid
North
to
Korea
ask how
though, of
much it
course.
is. North Korea, Iran, those places.
Yeah, the usual favourites on the sales account, but everywhere else is.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, what's the price range?
So that comes in at a very good value price of 995 of your British pounds. That's about 1,400 US dollars, I think, at current exchange rate.
Yes, yes, indeed. That you're right about you could spend a lot of money and uh, kind of lenses and scopes and
Yeah,
imaging equipment and software and computing equipment and all of that.
it's interesting seeing what are the factors that affect the price of astronomical equipment. I think the biggest factor is making it out of metal. If you make something out of plastic, it's very cheap. You can do injection molding of 1,000, 10,000 component runs, and your price just crunches down. As soon as you're making it out of metal, the largest production run in terms of your um, price per unit curve basically flattens at about 100 units. So there's no upward benefit of producing anything more than 100 units. And you're also into typically nowadays CNC machining of the metal, which is a lot more expensive than injection molding, of course. So that's your main single factor that affects telescope and telescope accessory manufacturing. I always think it's a shame that you can't make it out of technical Lego. Technical Lego is obviously amazing, something we're all familiar with, and you can build crazy stuff out of it. But it's too flexible. So, so my dream of a 24-inch truss tube out of technical Lego died because it won't hold the weight.
So will the astrometric turret work with like a Celestron telescope?
Yeah, I mean, we recommend it on minimum aperture size of 4 inches for a refractor and sort of 7 or 8 inches on a reflector.
Excellent. Well, that is really neat. I have to check that out. So are you an astronomer as well?
So yeah, I mean, I started. I'm not a professional astronomer and never have been. I'm what I call a desk astronomer. So I sit behind the desk. I do a lot of work with our social media guy in terms of building a profile of MPay, going to events and talking to people and demonstrating equipment and that sort of stuff. Obviously, that's not been happening for the last 8 months. But yeah, I started astronomy when I was a child, like a lot of people, and seeing the sky. I was lucky. I lived out in the countryside, in Nottinghamshire, in the county, and we could see the sky quite well from where we lived in the village. and yeah, I was mesmerized by the stars. So ever since, I've always wanted to get into it. And then I worked in the city for quite a few years in London, and got to the point where I was able to start my own firm, which was very lucky. And now here I am, living on pot noodles.
Um, let's see. What besides astronomy? What other hobbies do you have?
Um, that's a good question. I'm going to have to think now. Hanging out with my wife, that's lovely. I like the cinema. I've been an usher at the patient cinema at St Thomas's Hospital in London for 15 years, which basically means taking patients from the wards to the cinema. You sit and watch the film, and then at the end of the movie, you would take them back to the ward. It's an amazing little organisation, MediCinema. Not to plug something else too much on your interview, I do apologise.
Oh no, no, it's fine.
But it's a great sort of like small charity. Everyone who works there are volunteers, so there's a great sort of camaraderie and sort of community feel about it, which I've really enjoyed. And you bring a lot of happiness to the patients. I mean, St Thomas's Hospital is St Thomas is a special hospital in the UK because it's the hospital that's right opposite the Houses of Parliament in central London. It's the one where Boris Johnson recently went to and was saved from the COVID virus. So you get a lot of people going in for like groundbreaking, life-saving treatments. So it's a very uplifting hospital to be in because of that. I mean, some hospitals, sadly, like the hospices in the UK, where people go to die and they never come out. But St Thomas's Hospital is the opposite of that. People go there for like amazing things. And when sort of people are on the ward and they're sort of like massively drugged up and they've just had major surgery or they've had a cancer cut out of them and that sort of thing, it's obviously a massively stressful time for them and their families. So to come to the cinema, it's like a proper cinema. It's not like a big TV screen. It's like, it's a properly installed cinema, proper seats, surround sound, the whole 9 yards. So to go to a proper cinema and sort of escape the ward and go into the fantasy world of whatever the film is a really positive, uplifting experience for them, and also the ushers as well. It's it's good. I like it. So that's my other main hobby.
Is it all age groups, or is there a big concentration in a particular age group?
Yeah, it's all age groups. So they have screenings for children, and they do them earlier in the daytime, sort of like a matinee performance, purely because the evening shows sort of finish at like 9:30, 10 o'clock. So the kids' movies for the Children's Hospital at St Thomas is shown earlier in the afternoon, and then there's an evening show for the more adult movies. But they don't show sort of like graphic films like Saving Private Ryan or stuff like that. That wouldn't get shown for sort of obvious reasons. They tend to like show the uplifting, happy movies that get made, and Star Wars and Spider-Man and all the classic action comic stuff and so on.
Yeah, though, kind of the what do you call it whenever children kill parents in Star Wars? I kind of take exception to that, or
Parenticide or something like
parenticide.
that.
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of have that happen twice, right? I mean, like in the old series, you had Luke fighting Darth Vader, and then in the new
Yes.
series, you have the Han Solo getting killed by his son. And
Yeah.
as a father, I really have trouble with that concept.
Well, absolutely. Maybe there's a dark insight to domestic violence there that George Lucas is perhaps hiding. Who knows?
Yes.
I never actually thought of it now until you mentioned it, but now I
A
feel like
secret
that.
wish, a secret wish. I can't do it in real life. I could do it in the movies over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Or maybe a fear. I don't know if he has children.
Mm.
Anyway. Well, that's awesome. Well, I guess you know, one of the big controversies in astronomy right now is all these, um, you know, huge constellations of satellites that are being
Yep.
put up. And I've been trying to do a little amateur off and on satellite watching, you know, towards dusk. And I can see lots of really bright satellites. I mean, there's a lot of them. And, you know, it's funny. It's like I have yet to see a Starlink satellite, but I've seen like Globestar and some of these other satellites, and they are really bright. And you see them
Yeah.
over and over and over again. And I've not heard anybody talk about these companies. Are these companies saying that they're going to try to do something to sort of reduce the impact they have on visual
Hmm.
astronomy from the Earth? But you know, SpaceX has come out and said, you know, they're going to keep working at the problem until they solve it and make it so that
Yeah.
it doesn't cause the problem. And I'm just wondering, what have you heard? What's your take on it and that type of thing?
So I think, I mean, as an astronomer, I'm generally against light pollution anyway. I always say to people, you know, light pollution interferes with the reproduction of insects, apparently. So I always tell that to people, and you know, if we lose the bees, we're going to go shortly after. So I tend to say things like that about light pollution. It's easier to get it into conversation than say I'm an astronomer and I don't like light pollution because it damages my imaging of the sky because I'm like weirdo. so um, so yeah, I'm generally against all things like pollution. Um, I think it's good that SpaceX have wanted to work with people once they realised that there was a problem. I mean, certainly in terms of getting black coatings on materials that would massively reduce the reflectivity. Um, in some respects, completely eliminate it, depending what coating they went for, is a good shout. It's going to add a little bit of weight, of course, to satellites, and depending on what the surface coating is, it could be subject to degradation from the radiation that you're going to get out in space. You know, obviously in direct sunlight, it's very hot. In orbit, conversely, in the shadow of the Earth, it's extremely cold. But I think you know there's a huge amount of chemical and um, you know manufacturing processes and electrolytic and such that could be employed to you know, anodize aluminium parts, matte black, you know, coat them with you know nanotubes which absorb a huge amount of light, or just you know, basic black paint would be good. And I suppose until Starlink came along, no one had really thought about satellites in that regard, because whilst there's, like you say, there's quite a few up there, it's not it's not until sort of now looking forward that we're going to get thousands and thousands of satellites in low Earth orbit. So yeah, it's another interesting development. It's you know it's the next step along the road of industrialization, isn't it? At the end of the day.
Yeah,
But if it gets more people looking up and interested in astronomy, that's a good thing.
but you know, you kind of touched on something that I'd like to explore a little bit more, and that
Yeah.
is uh, you, in terms of the impact of these things to astronomical discovery, you don't see that as really moving the needle in the public space, but in terms of kind of food production and like the ecosystem, you see that as being something that would have an impact that people would respond to. And,
Oh yeah,
and-
totally.
but you know, I guess the thing is, I feel like in terms of scientific discovery and kind of exploring our world and trying to understand the universe, that as a mainstream concern, this is really a very low in the priority list. Like people don't really like, they would be far more interested in like you know kind of like sports teams or politics or things as
Hmm.
opposed to actual, you know, the acquisition of knowledge
Yeah.
from the universe. And I was wondering if you felt the same way, and if you did, what would it take to kind of, I mean, what are some factors that you think would help to make society as a mainstream really start to value the acquisition of knowledge and scientific discovery? I mean,
That's a very good question. I think there's always going to be, you know, groups of people who are interested in groups in different things. So I think you're always going to have you're interested in science and acquisition of knowledge type people. I always think you're going to have people who are just interested in like sports and pop music and soap operas and stuff like that, and maybe they have no interest at all in the acquisition of knowledge. Maybe the acquisition of knowledge is perhaps too focused a definition. If you're following a sport or a soap opera, you're acquiring information, not information that a scientist may recognize as useful information. But then, you know, there's a philosophical argument as to what is useful information. If information about sports teams and soap operas and pop music allow you to interact and with other people and to socialize with other people, and acquisition of knowledge of chemistry and physics perhaps doesn't allow you to interact with other people, then, you know, it's the people who, you know, it's people who are not acquiring what a scientist would class as knowledge, you're perhaps going to have more integrated lifestyles with humanity. I think in terms of, I think everyone's got an interest in astronomy without actually knowing it. And this, you know, if I walked in one day, LMP is going to build some telescopes, and we've got some on the drawing board, and we've got some mounts as well, because we want to have like a complete package that we can sell, rather than individual accessories. So one aim I have is to go out into Nottingham city centre, which has a massive market square. It's in fact the second largest market square in the UK after Trafalgar Square, for those who know how big Trafalgar Square is. And I'm going to take this setup and I'm going to like point it at the moon, sort of like on a Friday, Saturday evening, sort of like 7, 8 o'clock, as the sun's going down and the moon's coming up, and it's like crescent moon. And I'm going to show people the moon who've never seen it before. And I've seen examples of this. You show someone the moon who's never seen it before through a telescope, and they are totally blown away. It doesn't really matter where they're from, what they're doing, their background, their educational level, or whatever. You show someone craters on the moon on the Terminator line at, like, you know, 50, 100 times magnification, and they're like, whoa, check that out, and they can't get their eyes off the eyepiece. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually saw a little documentary, I think it was like 5 minutes long, about a guy that did that in Los Angeles. He just had random people come up and look, and he filmed their reaction. And in fact, that inspired me that as soon as this COVID-19 situation gets over with, I want to get a telescope, go to a place like that, and do these interviews as like impromptu based upon some subset of.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. But you know, the other side about that, you said you're a desktop astronomer.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking that Starlink might be really useful in a different way, like Starlink in combination with like Tesla energy. You could create kind of like a package for remote observatory situation, and you have Starlink for the you know, the data and the command and control. You have you know, solar arrays for the power, and it's a completely automated like observatory, and you could literally put these in like the remotest places all over the place. And I mean, maybe you get the cost of each unit down to like 10,000 or so, you know what I mean? And you don't need any type of infrastructure in place. You just
that's an interesting idea. I mean it's kind of already happened with some remote observatories. I think the Chile scope is a remote observatory that you can access, and John Moores University has a fully robotic remote controlled telescope in the Canaries, on the islands off the west coast of Africa, and I think other places there's remote controlled telescopes. So yeah, you could do that. I mean, in terms of a unit price for a whole package, yeah, realistically, including installation, $10,000 is probably going to be around the ballpark. I mean, getting it to some sort of, you know, exotic dark sky location where you're hundreds of miles from light pollution would be the significant cost in that. I mean, you know, to get somewhere really remote, I don't know, the mountain range in the middle of the Sahara, for example, that I think is on the Algeria, is it the Algeria border? So it's like super, super remote. You can only get there by camel. So, so yeah, installing something there would be difficult.
But I was kind of imagining if you're getting a package small enough to fit in the back of a small pickup truck,
Yeah.
or and then you could get a helicopter to like lift it literally any place, right? Uh,
You could. When I was at the Tainan Star Party last year, I actually met a guy who'd got these massive Fujinon binos on a flatbed truck. And that's pretty much what he did. It's like drive around, get somewhere really dark, and then set up and start looking.
that
So that was fun.
Yeah, I mean, because if you get as far away from the road, you don't have to worry about traffic, and
Yeah.
also it may be your equipment may be safer from like theft and
Yeah, for
vandalism
sure.
as
For
well.
sure.
I mean, if the only way to get to it is through helicopter, at least that limits the number of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so did you know that NASA is planning to send people back to the moon in 2024?
I do. I do. I'm quite excited about this. So it's not really been in the news much at all in the UK, and certainly not the news channels that I follow. So I think it's either going to have some big release and big launch in the next couple of years, or it'll just be like a small snippet, like oh, America landed on the moon again, and everyone will ignore it. I wouldn't put it past the media in this country to ignore something as monumental as a moon landing. Um, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's great that we're going back, and I think it's hopefully we'll be there to stay. Certainly, with the cost of rocket launchers coming down and it becoming more and more mainstream, I hope to live long enough to be part of the era where it becomes affordable for normal people to go into space. That will be a dream come true for myself, and I'm sure a lot of other people.
Yeah, I started this project December of last year, and in February of this year, I went to York because my company has a facility in York, and so
Yeah. Oh wow.
I interviewed people, London, York. I went up to Edinburgh for the weekend and back, so I was there for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and not a single one knew that we were planning to go to the moon, which is not surprising because even in America, only about maybe 10, 20% of people I've talked to knew. But
Wow.
every single one, without exception, was fairly supportive. Some had
Yeah.
questions about who would it benefit and opportunity costs and environment and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But it's definitely good. I think one big difference, whenever we went in the 1969, 1972 period, it was strictly an American enterprise.
Yeah.
Um, they're really working to try to make this more of an international enterprise. They
Yeah.
got Canada signed up to, make a Canadian arm for the orbiting outpost.
Cool.
Japan's really signed up to do some stuff.
Yeah.
ESA's taking some part, and
Nice.
we're also having kind of like funding and continuity issues with our Congress.
Yeah.
And one thought is maybe we can overcome that by working with another country to say, hey, how would you like one of your astronauts to be out there on the moon?
That'd be amazing. I mean, I think it's really nice that there's collaboration in space exploration. I always try to think that really that in the final frontier of space exploration, it's nice that there isn't actually any really sort of politics going on, but then sort of a part of me in my sort of like dreamy romantic side likes to think that all the problems that we have in the world are sort of like presented to us, and in reality everyone's actually on the same side and in the same club sat around the table and just throwing these things out there to put people off the fact that we're actually all working together and we're on the same side. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's really difficult. There's definitely a lot of fears in the world, and I mean, our powers of war have become so awesome in terms of the ability to destroy. Uh,
Oh, completely. And in a perverse way, I think that's what makes us safe. It's kind of peace through superior firepower, isn't it?
well, The thing is, I think that works well as long as you have a population that is familiar with the horrors of war. Um,
Yeah,
as the World War II generation and the Vietnam generation kind of pass away,
yeah,
I don't think there's a full appreciation of what war means, and it's definitely
no,
romanticized in movies.
yeah, yeah. As well as the cost of the technology drops, you would just get to the point where there's probably quite a number of well-resourced individuals who are only going to be 25 kilograms of uranium-238 away from a nuclear bomb, which might not be a good thing.
Oh, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
if you think of how the cost of technology has dropped and dropped, you know, aircraft are so much cheaper, computers are so much cheaper, telescopes are so much cheaper. Um, you know, so
and you could pretty much fabricate anything. You
exactly,
can
exactly.
pretty much go any place in the world and you could trade anything. It's definitely a different time. Um, so what do you think about our return to the moon? Do you do you see it as being something that is just kind of like nice and interesting, or do you see it as kind of like foundational to something bigger, humanity's expansion to the rest of the universe? I mean, like, where are you?
Yeah, I think it's foundational. I mean, there's so much benefit in blue sky scientific engineering research which we will gain that I mean, it's kind of it's so obvious, it's I mean, yeah, wow. I mean, where do you kind of begin with what the upside of going back to the moon is going to be? It's going to be so incredible. We'll be reaping the benefits for the next century. I mean, I was reading an article recently about sort of technological development, and they were saying that there's been so much technological development on the micro scale, specifically talking about computing and computer programming and that sort of stuff. And of course, you know, as I'm sure you do, we're probably about similar age. You remember the 80s and the early 90s era of computing. We're only 30 years on from that, but the technological progress has been like absolutely mind blowing. Whereas on an engineering side, technological progress has not really been that much. Obviously it's been there, and some areas obviously stepped forward quite significantly. But the Boeing 747 is still flying, and that was from the 1970s. Yes, it's upgraded, of course, but it's still the Boeing 747. Um, you know, train technology has gone that far. You know, so going to the moon gives us a real opportunity to push the engineering envelope. You know, it's a bit like nuclear fusion. I think this has been the missed opportunity of humanity by basically not investing in nuclear fusion. I understand the political reasons why that hasn't happened, but really, it's getting handed on as we're getting kicked in the ass now because we haven't developed nuclear fusion. When if we'd been pouring the money that got into military development into nuclear fusion, we'd be laughing now as humanity as a whole. So I'm really pleased that the Americans are leading this big push in going back to the moon because of the engineering technological steps forward that inevitably will come. And I think the most amazing thing is we don't actually know what they are until they happen. It's like Velcro and non-stick frying pans are like staples of everybody now, but until they're there, you've not got it. And you often can't have the utility or appreciate the utility of something until after you've got it, and until it's there. It's like a light bulb, isn't it? It's like, whoa, light. It's so obvious we need it, but you don't know until it got invented.
Yeah, there's a bit of a challenge though with getting true innovation, like uh, coming up with like a faster train system or a
Yeah.
better airplane or a better way to get to the moon and back. It's like the cost is so high.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big pressure to not to fail. which
Yeah.
means doing things that have been proven, which
Yeah.
means not taking chances, and innovation is by and large, a chance, right? I
Yeah.
mean, um, and I feel like, like airplane travel, people are really afraid to do something different because, we sort of have this whole system invested into the way things are. That if you did
Yeah.
something different, then it's just like, how do you get people to accept it? Is it really that much better? All that
Yeah.
kind of interesting thing. You mentioned the 747 is still flying,
Yeah.
but the Concorde is not, which is
The
kind of
no.
it's kind of our ability to travel between places actually have gotten slower, and if you
Yeah.
average in the Concorde. But have you heard about what SpaceX is planning to do with their Starship?
I haven't. No. What are SpaceX planning to do with their Starship?
Okay, so they're building a 100% reusable rocket
Yeah.
in southern Texas, and they plan to use. It's going to be able to carry 100 people into space at a time.
Yeah.
It'd be the most powerful rocket ever built at a time, but it'd be the cheapest per launch because it's 100% reusable.
Wow. Yeah.
And they plan to use it for point-to-point Earth travel. So you
Nice.
could go from like London to Houston in 30 minutes. Um,
Awesome.
yeah,
Not even enough time for an interval drink.
I know. See all the money they save? No, just kidding. Yeah, exactly. You would just get on and get off. You may need a few weeks to recover from the flight, but
Yeah,
anyway.
it's going to be. I mean, what's the G-force of the launch in a flight like that? It's not going to
I,
be for everybody.
it's not going to be for everybody. I think it's like two or three.
That's not too bad.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's not too uncomfortable.
and plus you get some free fall at the top, so you could be
Yeah,
weightless. And then you get a really crazy landing where the ship is like skydiving.
yeah.
So,
No, that's exciting. That'll be good.
if it was safe and affordable, would you go into space?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see the curvature of the Earth and the sunrise. It'll be amazing.
Would you go further than low Earth orbit? Would you go to like the moon or Mars?
Oh, I definitely go to the moon. Mars, I don't know. Maybe after I've been to the moon and then see how I feel about it. I mean, it's obviously a much longer trip to Mars, so I'd have to see how I got on with space flights and prolonged weightlessness on the few days to the moon, and then if I like that, then maybe go to Mars. I guess. I mean, the the moon, I would expect there to be like almost 100% chance of coming back from, whereas Mars might be, well, it's might or might not be a one-way mission. I think if it was definitely a one-way mission to Mars, I wouldn't go on it. I mean, I know a lot of people who would, but I wouldn't want to do that. I love my life too much here on Earth. So so yeah, at least on the moon, I'm at the top of the gravity well. So theoretically, I can build a big enough catapult to send me home.
Um, you know, uh, there was that Mars One group that said there
Yeah,
was like thousands of people that would be willing to do a one-way trip. And
yeah,
the Perseverance rover is going to take 200 days to get from uh, Earth to Mars.
yeah,
And I got to imagine that the accommodations would be very tight. I
yeah.
wonder after 200 days of lockdown, if people are maybe reconsidering their true appetite and desire to go to
Indeed,
Mars.
indeed. I mean, it'd be worse than sort of like the pioneering sea voyages of many years ago, wouldn't it? It'd be much, much worse than that. Um, yeah, I mean, and that invites its own individual challenges to, how do you deal with 200 days of isolation in a small capsule with maybe 5 or 6 other people? Haven't there been some experiments on that, of just locking people in a capsule and seeing what seeing what happened?
Yeah, there have been lots of experiments around small group isolation for a long time. I think there's this HERA experiment that's done here in the uh, Johnson Space Center, where participants of, crews of like 4 to 8 people are put into
Yeah.
kind of like a facility that's really small for, weeks to months at a time. And then there was like
Yeah.
this, I forget who did it, but it was like Mars 500, where they were like put into a simulated Mars mission for 500 days. So
Wow.
you had the transit there where they had to pretend like they were in a spaceship, and then whenever they got there, they could do surface operations, and then
Yeah.
kind of on the spaceship back. And it's like people really become antisocial and
Mm.
difficult dealing with each other.
Yeah.
I mean, on one hand, you're isolated, but from all the wrong people, because you really want to be isolated from the people that are on the ship with you. You're like, can
Yeah.
you please stay on your side? Thank you.
I mean, there might be some sort of, virtual reality sort of applications where you could spend a lot of time in virtual reality in other places, and you're actually only in the capsule dealing with the other people for a couple of hours a day. But you know, how you know how have astronauts on space stations, for example, on the long flight missions, dealt with personal hygiene and sexual interaction and all that sort of stuff starts coming into it after 200 days. You might be perfectly okay with, say, 50 days abstaining, but after 100, who knows what could happen.
I know it's a challenge, and of course, we have married astronauts that married couples that are both astronauts here in the
Yeah.
U.S. In fact, one of the astronauts who is coming back today on the SpaceX Dragon capsule,
Yeah.
his wife has been selected for like the not the next launch, but the one after that. So,
Oh, fantastic.
I mean, you already have.
With her husband.
No, I think they're avoiding each other. One's on Earth, one's in space. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, the ultimate long distance relationship, right?
Yeah.
So, well, Dave, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
Let me think. I don't think so. Yeah, it's been fun chatting with you. It's getting to think about things that I don't often think about. So it's always interesting to meet a like-minded person to have this kind of conversation with.
And next time I go to the UK, I have to look you up, and maybe we can
Absolutely.
meet up.
Sure. Come to Nottingham. I'll show you around. It is the Las Vegas of the UK.
Oh, is
It's
it?
it's an exciting place, Nottingham. It's where lots of good stuff happens. Linkin Park and Guns N' Roses have both played here twice. So
That is awesome. Well, you have a good rest of your day, and
yeah,
look
thank you,
forward to
Nathan.
staying in touch. Take care.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.